Today, an unpopular opinion that bucks the tactical consensus. And before I ruffle a bunch of feathers, let me just remind you, I do this podcast with all the other podcasts out there, not for me, for you guys, based on real-world first-hand experience. I'm blessed to have quite a bit of it and still be on this side of the dirt breathing. And I like to share that experience in training and pass it on to you. That said, that does not mean that I am so vain that you have to agree with me on everything. I realize that many people will disagree with the thoughts and case presented in this episode. I'm okay with that, because I think it's germane. I'll plug in the bio. But hopefully you're already subscribed, following the show. But if not, you may want to reach down and do that. I was going to do an entire episode on carry guns with manual safeties. Like good options for carry guns with manual safeties. However, I thought that this should be a prelude to that. So if carry guns with a manual safety interests you, make sure you're following, subscribe to the show. And as always, you are welcome to become a patron. Patrons get a lot of early insider content, a lot of content you never ever hear on the podcast, on the mainstream. And there's things in there that I'll say that I won't say on this podcast. You want to become part of that inner circle. You want to step up and be an active participant instead of just a passive, laissez-faire listener. Consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as a instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the L.A.P.D. both full-time as a sworn police officer and some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a F.B.I. firearms instructor, still am an F.B.I. firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Also N.R.A. certified and some other 3-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Enough about me, guys. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. Let's get into today's topic. So, many may tell you that safeties on a carry gun, no good. No go, bad deal. Why would anybody do such a ridiculous thing? Now, you've likely heard my bio. I would. I carry a gun with a safety. In fact, my 2 go-to carry guns have safeties. When I was the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters, my go-to guns had safeties. Now, not always. When I was a cop, I carried a polymer striker fire, or I carried a SIG 229, neither of which have a safety. But that was when I had a lot less training, back when I thought I was a really good shooter until I actually started shooting competition and realized I had a lot to learn. But so I've carried both. And when I was a private contractor, even later, I carried a Glock because that's what I was issued. And I was in areas where you couldn't have your own guns. They said, this is the gun that you will use. These are the guns, the tools that you will use, whether that's a Glock all the way up to, well, I guess I shouldn't be too specific, but up to many different kinds of machine guns and even heavier weapons. Say these are the guns that you will use. And you do the best you can with what you have. So I guess to be fair, let's dive into why the, let's just say, Glock action type, what they will call a safe action, and there are many other, the vast majority of polymer striker fired handguns, why that has become the default, why that has become the Breyer's vanilla of the handgun world, the Honda Civic, if you will, kind of the baseline. Why has that become that? Well, it has a very easy manual of arms, except for a revolver, which you got to remember, many police officers, even when I became a police officer, L.A.P.D. in the aughts, there were cops still carrying revolvers. And it's a pretty similar transition to go from a wheel gun, as far as manual of arms go, as to a Glock type action, what they would call a safe action, but is essentially it's not really a double action, it's more of an action and a half because the striker is partially cocked, but let's call it an action and a half, close to a double action. No aforethought, no premeditation, no extra action needed on a safety to fire the gun. You pick up revolver, you pull trigger, revolver goes off. I'm talking a double action, not like an old cowboy revolver. I'm talking about modern double action revolvers or double single action revolvers. Pull trigger, gun goes off till gun is empty. Glocks or many of the other polymer striker fireds. Pick up Glock, pull trigger, Glock goes off till Glock is empty, unless Glock has a malfunction. It is a super easy manual of arms. And like I have said before, most cops are not gunfighters. And I say this as somebody that was a cop. It's a super hard job. It's a really hard, demanding, mostly emotionally dealing with like people abusing kids and drug abuse, and it's a tough job. But that doesn't make a cop a gunfighter. Most cops are not gunfighters. I'll stand by that. Ask the average cop the amount of time they spend training and pulling the trigger versus how much time they spend behind a keyboard or a steering wheel or a pen, right? That they're administrators. They're the right arm of a magistrate. And there are exceptions. Not all cops. Some cops are gunfighters. They're on special teams, tactical teams, or the real serious ones that take it upon themselves to do extra training, to go train, to go shoot competition, to take extra tactical training. Or they're in a specialized role where they get a lot of tactical training, a SWAT team, an H.R.T team, a S.R.T team, something like that, an active shooter response team, right? Those guys, some of them are gunfighters. But if you're trying to teach a bunch of people to, let's say, have an acceptable level of competency to hold the litigious wolves at bay, meaning lawyers, you want a simple thing. I'll give you another example that just came to me. Look, the Crown Victoria. Got asked about that recently by a patron. It's a decent vehicle. It's a pretty vanilla, pretty, tepid vehicle. It's got some upgrades if you're talking about the cop one, but here's where I'm going with this. It's an automatic transmission, right? It's an automatic transmission. I'm not aware, none of the police vehicles that I ever used were a manual transmission. They were all automatic transmissions. Crown Vics, SUVs that I used, they were automatics. Now, if you know how to drive well, you can do better with a manual. Why don't they give cops manual transmissions? Because it's the easiest thing to teach everybody to use is a automatic transmission. Not because it's better, because it's the easiest to teach people. To have a fair degree of competency. If you ask an expert driver, and I'm not pretending to be the best driver in the world, but if you ask an expert driver, they're going to get in a race, or they're going to try and have a good conclusion to a high-speed pursuit, they're probably going to want a manual transmission. Or you can do things with a manual that you cannot do with an automatic, or that an automatic won't do. But it's easier to give everybody an automatic. You see a parallel there with giving everybody a Glock or something similar. And since people view many people in law enforcement roles as an authority on firearms, and I'm not sure that's a good thing, but that's the way that it's seen, and that's what they're familiar with. That may be, especially nowadays, one of the only things they've ever used or ever shot. You get this echo chamber of not everybody, but many people saying that, oh, it's silly, to be polite, to carry a gun with a manual safety. I do not concur. I do not concur with that opinion. I'll give you some, and I'm not saying my opinion is right. I'm saying I hold a different opinion. You can, and I still carry some guns without a safety, right? I often carry a .357 Magnum without a safety, right? I'm not saying you have to carry a gun with a safety. I'm saying for most of my stuff, and I did this switch years ago, I prefer a manual safety. I'll get into that later, but I'm going to lay out some cases why you may want to carry a gun with a manual safety, whether it's for duty use, because I've done that too, or for concealed carry, which I do. Okay, so I believe that a firearm with a safety that you have to actually disengage with an extra action, with a forethought, is an advantage to the highly trained operator of that firearm. Just like the manual transmission is advantageous to the very skilled driver. If you are willing to put the reps in, and I'm not talking about going to qualify every 6 months or every 3 months or whatever it is, I'm talking about daily practice. If you consider yourself a gunfighter, daily practice, several times a week at least practice. Gunfighting is a perishable skill, much like a bench press, right? You can't bench press once every 6 months and expect to be good at the bench press. You may be naturally gifted and a little bit better than others at a bench press, but you're not going to be as good as if you bench pressed at least a couple of times a week, or you worked out every day and a bench press was part of that. You get what I'm saying? To somebody that's willing to put in that dedication, the prayer, the repetition, the reps, the discipline, I think they will glean more out of a gun with a manual safety than one without it. Here's why. You can generally get a gun with a much better single action trigger and carry the gun with a single action trigger with a safety engaged, like your classic 1911, like what I carried as the commander of a tactical team, an STI 2011, which is basically a double-stacked polymer kind of Franken 1911 that's like the Ferrari of 1911s. I would not advise carrying a gun like that without a safety, right? It lets you have a much better trigger pull, and for a highly skilled shooter that can, let's say, consistently make headshots at 50 yards with a handgun, standing offhand, they can wring a lot out of that really, really good trigger. And although you can get that with a double single, I can get it right off the bat, right? I can go from everything's copacetic right now to somebody is trying to kill me right now and have that trigger pull right then. I can have that crisp, clean. I don't even care so much about the weight. Both of my STIs have a factory trigger. My regular, well, not regular, but a very nice Colt 1911, a single stack 45 that I carried on duty, had they all had factory triggers. You're not talking crazy light triggers, but really pristine, clean, crisp, predictable triggers. Just a thing of beauty compared to the Glock trigger, which I would compare to dragging a piano down a gravel road. You can have that trigger pull on tap. One trigger pull, really good, all the time. Right away. If you put the reps in, it adds no extra time. Look at the vast majority of really good competition shooters. Many of them will shoot a 1911 or something like it derivative unless they're in a division that doesn't let them. The reason there are other divisions is because those guns cannot compete with that kind of trigger pull, among other things, right? They don't have different divisions in USPSA so that the old school 1911 type guns can keep up with the Glocks. No. They have those divisions so somebody with a Glock can keep up with somebody with an STI and still shoot the same kind of competition because they're in a different division. Those are artificial rules. They don't exist in a gunfight. But it illustrates a point in how good those triggers are, how good that operating system can be. And there are disadvantages to it too, but that's one big advantage of carrying a gun with a manual safety. Now, let us first ask why. And this may be uncomfortable, but I think it's important. Why do you carry a handgun? Even deeper, what is the point of a firearm? In general, there are some exceptions, right? Some people make firearms so beautiful. They're literally Tiffany & Co. engraved firearms. They're never really meant to be shot. They're decorative pieces. But what is the real point of a firearm? It is to launch a projectile to hit a target. To launch a projectile to hit a target to bestow a certain outcome on said target. Now that could be shooting a quail out of the air with a shotgun. It could be cutting a nice little round hole in a piece of paper with a wad cutter for target bullseye type shooting. It could be clanging a piece of steel at 1,000 yards. It could be 2 to the chest, 1 to the head from a CCW firearm to stop somebody that is actively trying to take human life. If a man sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. Either way, that is the point of the firearm, to launch a projectile to hit the target to have a desired outcome. Hitting the target is important, and that ties into the point we just talked about. If you can get a better trigger pull, and if a manual safety makes that safe in a carry type situation to have a better trigger pull, that increases the talents and the abilities you have to hit varying targets at varying distances and varying time frames, then that is an actual distinct advantage. So ask yourself that. Are you carrying a handgun to hit a given target, or are you just carrying it as a safety blankie? In which case, just get a single shot Derringer and call it good. But I think many people in the carry community are, it's good enough. Because I don't think they actually picture or actually expect to have to use their concealed carry weapon. And I hope they never do. And there is the real probability, or not probability, but the real possibility that one could draw a firearm and the person stops doing what they're doing. In which case, that's a win. That's great. But you should be ready to have that gun do what it was designed to do. Launch a projectile and hit a given target and have a desired effect. Can you shoot a Glock trigger very accurately? Yeah. Can I do headshots at 50 yards with my Gen 5 Glock 17? I can. It takes way longer. And it takes a lot more effort and a lot more skill to do that than it does with my STI 2011. Making headshots at 50 yards consistently. Why? Because it's a better trigger. It requires less overall movement. It's cleaner. There's less overall distance for that trigger to travel. It increases the ability to hit a given target to have a desired effect. Another one is because polymer striker-fired guns like Glocks, I mean, just Glock alone takes up a large share of the handgun market. And I don't know exactly what those numbers are, but it is staggering how much. So the average criminal, right, the only handguns they may have ever been exposed to are going to be a Glock or something like it. There is a chance, and to give credit where credit is due, I heard Masad Ayub talking about this, about how they did experiments that I was unaware of. I forget what police departments or whatever did experiments looking at different handgun options, and they found when they tested unskilled, like untrained people with handguns, many of them could not even figure out how to disengage safeties in a timely manner and like a reasonable amount of time that would happen in a gunfight. They would either give up or it would take so long that they couldn't, that it was irrelevant. They couldn't fire that gun. And remember, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, that's ridiculous. The safety is so easy to take off that of course anybody can pick it up and shoot you with your own gun. Yet it's so difficult to use that you're never going to remember to sweep the safety off if you have to use it. You can't have it both ways, right? That's not how that works. Yeah, if you only ever carry a Glock and you carry a Glock for years and you were trained by guys that carry Glocks and you pick up a 1911 one day and then you start carrying it, you're probably going to forget to take the safety off at some point. But if you were willing to put the reps in and the time in and the dedication in, again, that's where that training favors a highly skilled person. And the person that is not highly skilled, that just picks up a gun, I'm just going to stick with the 1911. There are many guns with safeties, but I'm just going to stick with that one. They may not know how to use that gun. They may not figure out how to get it to fire. And if they do, it may at least buy you some time to do whatever action you need to do to break contact, recover the gun, do a gun disarm, which is a bad day. Like I know and have trained gun disarms and trained other people. It's a bad day. You don't want to have to be in that position, but it could certainly buy you some time, especially if you can see that they still have the safety on. Again, it favors the highly trained person. Also, here I'm going to point something out. Every warfighter, well, I shouldn't say every, but almost every warfighter, Army and Marine, and the entire global war on terror, their primary, for infantry, their primary guns over the vast majority of the past 20 years have had safeties. And nobody's like, well, that'll get you killed in the street. But if it's on a handgun, it'll get you killed in the street. Right? Every Marine that carries an M16, every Army soldier, 11 Bravo, that carries an M4, they have a manual thumb safety. No? Right? Like, they have a manual thumb safety. Even when you're going from low ready or high ready to presenting on target, you have to sweep off that safety. So I find it hard to swallow that, carrying a handgun with a safety will get you killed in the street. Yet that's what we issue to every Marine, every 11 Bravo, and I shouldn't say every because I'm an exception to that. I did, have M16s, but I was an assaultman and MOS no longer exists. Sometimes I had an M9, which also had a safety. But I assume some people will have Glocks or now the M17, which has a safety. But you get the idea. Every single Marine and soldier that's infantry, that's combat arms, they have a gun with a manual thumb safety. No? So I don't see a massive vomiting out of that and saying, well, this is ridiculous. Why would we have an M16 with a manual safety? Why would we have an M4 with a manual safety? Why would we have the new M7 with a manual safety? Why would we go to an M17 or an M18, the new sidearm, or the M7, the new rifle? Why would we keep a manual safety on those? Right? Because those guys are professional gunfighters. Right? What is the mission of a Marine Rifle Squad? Locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver, or repel an enemy assault by fire and close combat. Right? That's the mission statement. they're gunfighters. Marine Corps infantrymen are gunfighters. They use a gun with a manual safety. Here is another reality, even amongst gunfighters. I was a Marine. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. Negligent discharges, even among professionals, are a thing. Negligent discharges are a thing. I once saw a Marine, and I have no reason to doubt that I saw it, but I have no reason to doubt the gun was on safety because Marines are religious about your safety had better be on, and woe be the private or PFC or Lance Corporal that somebody catches with their safety off when it's not supposed to be, right? When it's not go time. We were on a ruck march. We were hiking through the desert. Somebody's gun was slung across their back because we were in pretty treacherous terrain, and that gun had bounced up and down their pack. Safety had got taken off, and not only, this is why I think it certainly probably was on safe, not only was it on, but I believe it may have been on burst. And it actually, their hand was nowhere near the gun. I was behind them, and the gun got caught on some of their gear in the trigger, and the gun went off. Right? I've seen it in training. Yes, in Iraq, we still trained, right? When we had downtime, we would still train a lot of dry fire, but sometimes dry fire is not as dry as you would like it to be. I've seen it. One I didn't see firsthand, but I was in the vicinity when it happened. One Marine shot another Marine, thinking his gun was empty. Yeah. And those are just things that the last one, I was in the area when it happened. I didn't personally see it happen, but it was like the talk of the time. Right? How sad is that? And again, that's among Marines, people I would consider professional gunfighters, literally professional warfighters. And negligent discharges happen. Right? Look at how many. And these aren't all going to be firearm related because you can die from many things. Right? You could have a M67 fragmentation grenade. Somehow the pin comes out and it comes out of somebody's pouch in the back of an armored personnel carrier and kills everybody back there. Right? Stuff happens. It's a dangerous job. However, you got to imagine that there would be far more accidents if there were not manual safeties on those guns. Because look at how many happen with the manual safety. And just the law of averages, right? Like if somebody casually carries a gun and they shoot it twice a year, the odds of having negligent discharge, let's say if it's 1 in 100,000, pretty low. Even if you get somebody that's highly, highly trained, if they pull a trigger and train literally millions of times or hundreds of thousands of times, sooner or later, and I know it shouldn't, but it does, something's going to go wrong. And there are many times when manual safety in certain scenarios will make no difference. There are certain times when it will make a difference. Like if you have the habit, and you should have the habit if you're carrying a gun with a manual safety, of before you go to reholster, engaging the manual safety. If it's that one time where your shirt is bunched up or you don't normally wear a hoodie, but that day you're training and you're wearing a hoodie and the zipper gets caught inside the trigger guard and you go to shove it down and you're frustrated because you just had a bad rep and you shove it down really hard in your holster, not looking, and the gun goes off because something got in the trigger guard. It's just one example. If you had the manual safety locked in, and you should still observe all safety rules. I'm not saying this gives you an excuse not to, but that's it. That's one example of how that could save you if you engage in manual safety before you reholster. Also, there are some people, and I'm not advocating this, I'm not saying this is good, but there are just some people that will not carry a gun with a round in the chamber with no safety. There are some people that just won't carry a gun with a round in the chamber at all. And I'm not here to put anybody down, but I would really think about, again, why are you carrying that gun? Are you actually expecting to use it? Are you actually willing to use it? If the answer to those things is no, it may be more as much as I like guns and enjoy guns, obviously, it may be more of a hindrance and more of a danger to you than not carrying at all. But if you're carrying, there are some people who are just not there yet, ready to carry a round in the chamber without a manual safety, but they will carry a firearm with a round in the chamber if it has a manual safety. And I would say, for sure, a gun with a manual safety with a round in the chamber is way better than some other type of action with no round in the chamber. Pre-adventure, you may have time to chamber a round, but I wouldn't count on it. And again, if that added manual safety gives you the confidence to carry with a round in the chamber, that's certainly better than no round in the chamber. This is not an exhaustive list, and hopefully you listen with an open mind. Again, I'm not telling you have to throw your Glock in the garbage can and get a gun with a manual safety, but hopefully at least made you consider and open your eyes to why there may be some advantages, even if for you they don't outweigh the disadvantages for carrying a firearm with a manual safety. And this overarching thing where guns with manual safeties for a carry gun are inferior, I don't believe that is the case. I'm not saying they're the best for everybody, but I think they're the best for some people. And again, hopefully you listen with an open mind on that. I hope you appreciate the show. If you appreciate the show and the content, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. This is what I do. I don't do this podcast mostly for me. I do it mostly for you guys to benefit, to get the information out there. If you valued this content as much as the fraction of the cost of a box of ammo, heck, likely if it's premium defensive ammo, for less than one round of ammo, you can become a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. If you value this, if you want to support, and if you want some of that insider content that only patrons get, consider becoming a patron. We do all kinds of stuff on there. A lot of, again, Patreon-only insider content. Today we were having a chat just on, I did a post on, we're talking with each other about what was your first gun. The first gun that you had, the first gun that you bought with your own money, your first handgun. It was a great, lively little chat. I think people really look back fondly on their first guns. Just a small thing that we did recently, because it's on the top of my head. We were doing it today. Anyway, consider becoming a patron. With that, let's roll into the tactical tip of the day. It's winter time. Don't eat yellow snow. Very important. No, but in all seriousness, did you know that Q-tips come in different shapes and sizes? Like, I think women use these things for different applications. Anyway, I commandeered some of my wife's, I asked her permission first, but I commandeered some of her fancy Q-tips. There are Q-tips with like big flat edges, and there are Q-tips with really small, fine points. And those can be awesome for gun stuff. Like getting in the corner of your optic, if you're running a gun with an optic, getting in those crease and crevices, or if you get something on the lens, just gently hitting it with the very tip of that Q-tip without doing any damage to the lenses. Awesome. So if you normally just buy the bulk pack of Q-tips, and maybe you want something a little bit better, you want to step up a little bit, I assume they sell them like the makeup cosmetic section, which, you know, why would you even go there? But maybe for this. And they have all kinds of different shapes and sizes of Q-tips. Who knew, right? Things you learn when you're married. And if you start running a handgun with an optic and carrying it, you'll likely start going through Q-tips like a woman, like several a day. If part of your routine is dry fire, preventive maintenance on your gun, you look down and your lens is a little bit dusty, dirty. Tactical tip, also real quick, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow the show if you're interested in carry guns with safeties. I plan on doing a whole other episode. In fact, I was thinking of that one a while ago, but I wanted to get this out first because I think it's more important than the gear, the whole mindset, the idea why. But make sure you're liked, following the show, subscribed, whatever you listen on, so you don't miss out on that episode. Also, if you want to reach down, hit some stars, leave a rating or review, that'd be appreciated too. All right, with that, the most important part of the episode, hopefully. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people. the Psalms, many written by David, a man after God's own heart, a mighty man of war. Make no mistake, a man after God's own heart. It is written in Exodus 15 in the words of Moses. The Lord is a man of war. David, a man after God's own heart. Many things, a poet, a king, and a mighty warrior. No contradiction there, men. Have a blessed day.